Senator, I condemn all violence that occurred on January 6th. And in addition, I think for what you quoted, Senator, I think that is endemic of how it is not proper to use retweets from someone or from people I don't know regarding such a controversial topic.
Will you apologize to the law enforcement officers for spreading the conspiracy theory that they were somehow complicit in the violence of January 6th?
Senator, again, I think that gets to how.
Right out of the gate, this hearing goes somewhere Trump-aligned officials never want it to go, straight into their own words. And not the polished, lawyer-screened ones, the ones they blasted online when they didn't think anyone would ever read them back in a Senate hearing with cameras rolling. Watch closely. Senator Durbin doesn't just question this Trump-aligned judicial nominee, he dismantles her entire online persona piece by piece. He walks through the tweets, the retweets, the conspiratorial posts, and he forces her to sit in the wreckage of her own feed. And as you'll see, the moment she tries to explain any of it, the ground just collapses under her. This is why this hearing matters, because we're not talking about someone auditioning for a podcast or a partisan job. This is a lifetime judicial appointment. Someone who would hold federal power for decades. And when you're being considered for that kind of authority, the Senate is going to look at what you chose to put into the world, especially when those posts question the legitimacy of law enforcement, accuse senators of orchestrating an insurrection, or push the fantasy that the January 6 mob were somehow Antifa in disguise. Pay attention to how Senator Durbin frames it. He doesn't attack her ideology, he attacks the instability, the recklessness, the judgment. He goes straight for the contradictions, the Trump-aligned official claims to respect the rule of law while posting content that undercuts the basic facts of one of the most violent attacks on the Capitol in U.S. history. And watch her answers. You'll hear a lot of long pauses, a lot of softening words, a lot of in hindsight and I regret. But you'll notice something else. She rarely disowns the content. She disowns the platform. She keeps saying she shouldn't have retweeted people she didn't know, as if the problem was unfamiliar usernames, not the conspiracies she helped spread.
Inflammatory social
this is where the imbalance shows. Durbin comes prepared, grounded.
Multiple members of the Senate. You repeatedly referred to Senator Mitch McConnell as, quote, cocaine Mitch. You also retweeted a post which accused him of, quote, embodying everything that's wrong with politics. You once told Senator Graham that he is, quote, true to no one but your own self-preservation. You accused Senator Collins of prioritizing her own personal political power over the president's priorities. Would you like to apologize to those senators and others which you've referred to in your social media today?
Yes, Senator. And if I may, any comments I made were in my personal capacity as a private citizen, but in hindsight, I think that using Twitter is not the right platform, especially retweets from someone I don't know regarding political opinions, controversial topics, or even characterizations of people. And so I do sincerely apologize for those posts. And if confirmed, Senator, I would faithfully uphold the judicial canons, which include avoiding any appearance of impropriety, and that would include social media. And I've also seriously considered Vice Ranking Member Durbin just completely deactivating Twitter.
Let me ask you about your tweets beyond personal references to members of the Senate. And I just focused on what you had to say about Republicans. You use social media to spread conspiracy theories as well regarding the attempted insurrection of the Capitol on January 6th, including, you said, that law enforcement was complicit in the violence. You appeared to agree with the tweet that stated the attack was, quote, orchestrated by members of the Senate and members of the Capitol Police. And you have elevated a claim that those storming the House chamber were, quote, Antifa in disguise. In addition, you downplayed the violence of the day, including assaults on law enforcement, by retweeting and posting, quote, we're all supposed to be sending thoughts and prayers to traumatized members of Congress whose workday was interrupted for a couple of hours.
That opening clash sets the tone immediately. Durbin doesn't warm up, doesn't ease in. He starts by reading her own words straight back to her. And look at her posture. Look at the hesitation. She keeps stressing that these were her personal comments, as if that makes it better. This is the part people underestimate. When someone is up for a lifetime federal judgeship, personal capacity doesn't save them, because what you post when no one's watching reveals what you truly believe when no one's grading you. And Durbin knows that. He uses her own framing to show the gap between what she said then and what she's trying to claim now. Then comes the pivot, and it's brutal. He moves from tweets about senators to the explosive claims she amplified about January 6. That shift is deliberate. He starts with bad judgment, then escalates to dangerous judgment. He shows a pattern. Watch how quickly her answers shrink. Instead of defending her posts, she retreats into the same line. She regrets retweeting people she didn't know. That's not a real defense. That's damage control. Because whether she knew the users or not, she agreed with the content enough to amplify it. Durbin even points out she appeared to endorse the idea that senators and Capitol Police somehow orchestrated the attack. That's not a slip. That's not something you casually share. And when he asks if she's willing to denounce the January 6 violence right here, in front of the committee, her answer is technically a yes. But listen to the structure. It's wrapped in qualifiers, explanations, and another round of tweets from people I didn't know. That's not how someone speaks when they're fully confident in their stance. That's how someone speaks when they're trying not to contradict their past self too directly, because they know the committee is watching for any sign of instability. Then we hit the critical moment. Durbin asks her to apologize to law enforcement officers. Not to the committee, not to Twitter, not to the public, to the officers. For spreading the narrative that they were complicit. This is where he puts her on the defensive permanently. Because there is no safe middle ground here. Either she clearly disowns the conspiracy, or she tries to sidestep it. And what does she do? She sidesteps. Again. That is the moment where Durbin takes full control. From here on out, she is reacting, not driving the conversation. She's trying to escape the frame he has built. The frame of someone too volatile, too conspiratorial, too politically charged for a lifetime role. Notice how Durbin then goes big picture. He brings it back to temperament, value.
For a couple of hours. Ms. Westerkamp, are you willing to denounce here and now the violence perpetrated on January 6th in this Capitol building?
Senator, I condemn all violence that occurred on January 6th. And in addition, I think for what you quoted, Senator, I think that is endemic of how it is not proper to use retweets from someone or from people I don't know regarding such a controversial topic.
Will you apologize to the law enforcement officers for spreading the conspiracy theory that they were somehow complicit in the violence of January 6th?
Senator, again, I think that gets to how retweeting posts from people I don't know on controversial topics I regret doing. And again, I condemn all of the violence that occurred on that day.
What we're trying to get to is whether you have the temperament for a lifetime appointment as a judge with extraordinary authority and power in that appointment. We don't know, as we vote and send off judges to do their duty, whether they're going to keep their word before us. We look at their background, we look at their values, and try to draw a conclusion as to whether they are stable and dependent, and whether or not they should have the authority and power for a lifetime on the federal bench. What would you like to say today about what you have put in your social media post in the past about events and about members of the Senate as to whether or not we should say that's an accurate reflection of your values?
Senator, I am a native Iowan, and I think that if you speak to any of my many colleagues and friends that are sitting behind me, that they would tell you that I live a life of integrity and credibility, and I regret any of those retweets about what occurred on January 6th. And again, I do condemn all of the violence that happened on that day, and if I am confirmed, would...
Last question. If you're confirmed to the Court of International Trade and later decide to rule against the executive branch, this one or a future one, would executive branch officials be required to comply with your decision?
Yes.
Without exception?
Senator, yes, and there are appeal mechanisms, but otherwise any party appearing before the Court of International Trade, I would expect them to comply with any court order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This second half of the exchange is where the stakes become fully unavoidable. Durbin is no longer just examining past posts, he's measuring her future power. That's why he starts framing the question around judicial authority, lifetime tenure, and the trust that federal judges must earn before they ever take the bench. He hits a key point here. The Senate has no way of knowing which nominees will honor their commitments once confirmed. That's why temperament, values, and consistency matter. He isn't accusing her of future misconduct, he's showing that her past conduct raises questions that can't be brushed away by an apology alone. And look at how she responds. She says she regrets the retweets. She says she condemns violence. She says she values integrity. But none of those answers confront the core issue, why she shared conspiracies that minimized the threat to the very institution she's now asking for power within. Then comes the final pressure point, and this one is essential. Durbin asks whether executive branch officials in any administration would be required to comply with her court orders if she were confirmed. This is a loyalty test, not to a party, but to the Constitution. And she gives the textbook answer, yes, they must comply. Here's why that moment is bigger than it looks. In the context of everything she posted, the conspiracies, the deflections, the claims about senators and police, Durbin forces her to align herself publicly with the rule of law, not the political impulses that shaped her past commentary. He puts her in a position where she must assert judicial independence, even if it contradicts the Trump-aligned ecosystem she previously amplified online. That's not an accident, it's a pressure trap. If she hesitates, she looks partisan. If she answers firmly, she risks alienating the very faction she used to echo. And because she's vetting for a lifetime position, she has no choice but to pledge independence, even if it clashes with her past online behavior. Then you see another senator try to soften the moment, adding context about nominees from both parties making charged statements in the past. But notice something subtle. Even that attempt to balance the narrative doesn't erase the impact of Durbin's interrogation. It doesn't rewrite the answers she gave, or the evasions she leaned on. It just shifts the tone for the room. The substance remains intact. This is where hearings like this reveal their real purpose. It's not about scoring viral moments, even though this one certainly produced several. It's about demonstrating whether someone can withstand scrutiny, whether they answer directly under pressure, whether their explanations match the gravity of their past actions. In that regard, Durbin came in with momentum and left with control. He shaped the narrative, set the parameters, and forced the nominee to recast her entire online identity as a series of hindsight regrets rather than sincere viewpoints. Meanwhile, the nominee's reliance on retweet disclaimers and vague remorse made her look cornered, not composed. And the deeper consequence is this. Every senator watching that exchange now has to decide whether they believe she truly learned from those posts, or whether she's simply trying to survive the confirmation process. That's the quiet calculation happening behind the scenes, and this exchange will be the centerpiece of that decision. This is why this moment matters. Not because of the theatrics, but because it shows the gap between public responsibility and private impulse. It shows how a Trump-aligned official's online persona, once unleashed without restraint, can collide violently with the demands of federal judicial power, and the committee didn't have to exaggerate anything. They just had to read her own words back to her and watch how she handled the fallout. That, right there, is why this hearing is gaining traction. Because it exposes the real disconnect, not between parties, but between what she said when she thought no one was watching and what she says now that everyone is. If you want more breakdowns like this where powerful people get pressed on the record, hit subscribe and drop your take in the comments. Who do you think came out stronger in this hearing? And what was the one moment that changed the whole exchange?